Hello, everyone, to another podcast for the Apraxia Foundation. I am Laura Smith, part of the professional advisory, joined with my co-host,
Jordan.
Jordy.
Hey.
Hi, Jordan, who is the president and founder of the Apraxia Foundation and really our fearless leader here. We are very excited, though, today to bring a new research article that is hot off the presses. Effectiveness of the Kaufman Speech to Language Protocol for Children with Childhood Apraxia Speech and Comorbidities when delivered in a dyadic and group format. That's a mouthful. And we have Nancy Kaufman herself. Hi, Nancy.
Hey, Nancy.
How are you? Hi, good to see you again. And we are joined with Mimi. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Mimi Branham. I'm a speech pathologist and director of the Curtis Center in Houston, Texas.
Perfect. And then Aravind, you're just a first name guy for me because this last name of yours, for some reason, I just cannot get down. So if you'd introduce yourself.
Hi, this is Aravind Namasivayam from the University of Toronto, and so excited to be here.
Welcome back. I think you might be the only one who's come back on our podcast twice now. So it's really
I made it twice. Thank you. I appreciate
it's
it.
an honor to have you. And then Nancy, how about you introduce yourself and describe what this is all about, what this article and how it came to fruition?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I'm Nancy Kaufman. I am the owner and director of the Kaufman Children's Center, and it's located in West Bloomfield, Michigan. This is my 43rd year being in the field. I probably shouldn't have started with that number, but
it's impressive.
It is.
And I was thinking about this because I figured that I would be asked something about the origins of the K-SLP methods, but I am a speech and language pathologist, and mostly I'm still a clinician, and I see children from other states and countries. I do evaluations of the little kids, and I try not to have to do anything administrative. And I started my internship at a hospital setting way back in 1979. And I have to give my mentor a lot of credit because she came up with the concepts of word shell. And basically what she taught me is if you just teach the shell of a word, meaning the words with the least amount of speech motor coordination, and then you start pushing in all of the more specific details of the word, you will then help the child to be shaped toward the adult form of words. That was brilliant. And at the time, very few people were talking about apraxia speech in children, and a lot of professionals didn't even believe it existed in children. So I know Mimi's nodding. You've probably come across this a long time ago. Aravind, I think you're too young. But anyway, see, it still happens. You're too young too. Sorry. Wait, what?
No, it still happens. I have a professor that I won't name who is actively teaching his students as we speak that it's so rare. Don't worry about it because it doesn't really exist. He's actively teaching them that as we speak. No, it's unfortunately still happening. But we're so I was still doing some graduate work and just learning about phonological processes. We speech and language pathologists would be able to follow this line of conversation, but that was the way that children simplified their own speech motor challenges when they couldn't fully produce the adult forms of words. And they were a set of rules. And I thought, wow, this is how we can teach others how to simplify words for the children, because they're not implementing phonological processes very strategically. And so that's where phonological processes came into play. And then I didn't realize it, but I was taught that the K-SLP followed the principles of applied behavioral analysis and always has followed the principles of motor learning from its existence, from the start. And I just didn't even know that. So then when I was explained that why it followed those principles, I started to get to know more about what applied verbal behavior was and what are those principles. And indeed, we've been following them. But now we could hone our skills even further by being more understanding of these principles of behavior. And basically, we're talking about establishing a new behavior. That's what we do, right? Speech and language pathologists. We're improving upon behaviors that already exist, right? And we also are eliminating behaviors that aren't very conducive to that process.
And so it was just like amazing to be able to learn more and more. And I really think if I do stop learning, that's when I'm going to retire. So it shouldn't be for quite some time.
That's amazing, Nancy. Thank you for taking us through that. I actually didn't know that you learned about this idea of word approximations from word shells from a mentor of yours. So that's really amazing. And I will say that I've taken all sorts of trainings as my background, specializing in childhood apraxia speech. And your word approximations, unfortunately, get a lot of criticism. And I am not one of them. So I will give talks that say, feel like I know this is a controversial practice, but I always use it. And I'll tell you why. You know, it sold me, Nancy. It wasn't even, I was a speech image pathologist before my daughter was born. And I used the Kaufman cards, like approach, not cards, but approach, before. And then I had my daughter and she ended up having apraxia. And I remember this pivotal moment. I found a therapist who was trained in the Kaufman method, took her to it. I wanted her to be able to say her name is Ashlyn. And she wouldn't even try it. She wouldn't even attempt it. And the therapist was like, how do we do this? She could say an SH because she could say shoe. So she was like, how about we say Ash? Immediately, my daughter's Ash. And she goes, fine, let's say in. Immediately, Ashlyn says in. And she was like, you just said your name. Put it together. Ashin. And where we had it, that was the first time she said her name. It still gives me chills. She wouldn't even attempt it. Yeah. So because of that story and that story alone, I have always been, hey, I'm going to tell you as a friend, this is controversial. Hopefully not anymore now that we're getting it in the research. So we'll have research to back it up. But it was controversial then, but I'm still a fan and I still recommend it.
And it should never have been controversial because the research on shaping behavior goes back to at least the 1950s. Yeah, and we haven't been looking at speech as a behavior, so to speak. And once we do, I think it opens up a lot of doors in terms of treatment techniques.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just scaffolding. It's just meeting the kid where they are and giving them some success and building from there. It's not where we stay. It's where we
I know I'm going to speak out of turn here. Is that okay? Okay, perfect. So because this is really close to me, like close to me in the sense, why does KSLP work? Yes, whether it works or not is another question, but why it works is where the controversy is. Most of the people are like, oh, KSLP is a word approximation. You shouldn't be doing it. You're doing drill activities. But here's the thing. Even as adults, when you have a word like Robert, what do we call that person? Pat on Bob. What do we call Williams? Bill. What did we just do? So even as adults, we do the inverse of the same thing. We simplify it. We do an approximation of what it is. We've always done that. And developmentally, that's what happens. But here is the beauty of it. I love the word show. Nobody disagrees that language is the driving force. Vocabulary and language is the driving force of communication. Speech is the cake, is the cream on top of it, if you have speech. But without language and vocabulary, you cannot have motor differentiation. You don't need movements if you don't have language.
Right.
It's just simple as that. But for some reason, you don't want to do approximation. Oh, that's not the way to be doing it, because that is essential to build language, which forces the motor system to differentiate. And that is called constraint catalyst model, which has been proposed for over 15 years by Jordan Green, Ignatius Knipp, and all the big researchers out there. We accept that, but we don't want to accept this. And in fact, data has been shown by Jenny Izzini's team and Jordan Green's team that when you have increase in vocabulary, the motor system breaks down. We have data on that. We have kinematic data on Jenny's paper from 2017. How do you control for that is to simplify the syllable structure so that the motor system can catch up to accommodate that vocabulary growth. That is what Kaufman is doing. That blew my mind. So I think we put that in this paper just to tell the world, hey, it is not just approximation what you think it is happening. It is so many levels deeper than that. So that's what I wanted to just add here.
Yeah, that was one of the things I highlighted in the article. So a direct quote from your article is, it has been shown that new vocabulary, just to reiterate, vocabulary growth spurts in children destabilizes the speech motor control system as evident by increased articulatory variability, And that's exactly what you just said, but I just wanted to reiterate it from our.
Absolutely.
You know
Absolutely.
what also makes me think about is that it totally follows natural development. And people say, well, it's not natural to teach approximations. I can agree with that in a way. I understand why people think so. But when children are just learning to speak, they don't say ball, they say ba,
Mhm.
right? They don't
Yeah.
say bottle, they say bottle. Eventually they get to bottle, and no one had to actually teach them that more sophisticated way of saying that adult form of the word. And kids with apraxia are not implementing phonological processes naturally like typical developing children in terms of their speech and language. And that's why we take them through those simplification processes that are very natural.
Yeah, I remember seeing you speak once and you saying that when you're looking to simplify the word, really look at what the phonological process would be the next level down and simplify it that way. And that was really helpful because I'm just going to go through the criticisms so you can dispel them, Nancy, because I know you've heard them, but you're here, so you'll just address them.
I have a list of myths on our website.
I probably am aware of all of them, but one of them is that people would take your cards and see the approximation and think you're supposed to start at the bottom, even if the child can say the word correctly, and take them through the bottom and go up, which is just so not. But go ahead and address that one. Should therapists take out those cards and start at the bottom and move ourselves up the hierarchy?
Okay, lots of things. First of all, it's a top-down approach. Okay? You ask the child to name something, you listen to them. How close were they to the adult form of the word? How could you get them to the adult form of the word and reinforce them toward each successive approximation toward that adult form? So it's top-down, and not to mention that the approximations on the backs of cards are merely suggestions, like you said, that follow the phonological processes that would be natural to that word, but there could be 100 other ways to simplify the motor plan of that word,
Sure.
according to what's in the child's repertoire.
Exactly. Absolutely. Perfect. Okay. When did you change from people hear Kaufman method, KSLP? When did that change actually happen and why?
At first, it was called speech praxis approach. And what I learned was that these methods are not just appropriate for children with apraxia of speech. And you know how controversial it is to actually come up with a formal diagnosis of CAS. But I felt that even in terms of the SLPs that are using the term phonological impairment, that the KSLP also addressed the children with those issues. They were just more consistent and predictable errors. They still followed natural phonological development, and that even speech sound errors could also be rehabilitated through the Kaufman approach, so to speak. And so I wanted to change it to speech to language, because we're actually shaping speech motor skills, but toward Arvind's talking about language. It's the functional use of the words. And so that's why. And that was a great question. I don't think I've ever been asked that before, Laura.
Awesome. That makes me feel good. Jordan, you want to jump in on something here?
It's just really, it's just a really good point that a child must first have language to build upon speech. And it's when we try to jump straight to the speech and saying the word out, right? This can also cause a lot of frustration for children with childhood apraxia. So I loved what you guys said about really trying to meet the child where they're at within that moment. It is with KSLP was actually the first approach I got in and what first made